Hello everyone, welcome back to the MTG Goldfish Podcast, episode 117, your weekly podcast covering everything Magic the Gathering related. Your host as always joining you, Richard, the owner of MTG Goldfish. What's up, Richard?
Hey guys, what's going on?
We're doing well. Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, is also joining us, our resident jank brewer and all-around content creator for Magic the Gathering. Seth, what's up?
Oh, what's going on, guys? We finally got the full spoiler. One more week of Amonkhet. I'm actually excited.
Very excited as well. You can find us on Google Play, iTunes, mtggoldfish.com, and now on YouTube. So, as Seth alluded to, we have the entire spoiler for Amonkhet. We get to see everything. We're going to talk about everything. We have some stuff that we want to highlight, but we're going to tackle the rest of the spoilers on a more of meta discussion and pick out a few cards that were not that we were not privy to last week. We're going to cover an interesting topic that we heard from the Magic the Gathering preview panel that we wanted to discuss. We're also going to discuss the... we didn't have a chance when it happened, and then we really didn't have a chance when we kept talking about Amonkhet, but we actually are going to discuss the split and fuse card change, the rule change. I know folks have been asking for us to do that. Seth is going to highlight an MTGO topic that we didn't get to really elaborate on, and that will bring us to Fish Mail. So let's just jump right in. We have the entire spoiler. What do you think now that you get to look at every little card and every color and everything we didn't get to talk about last week? Richard, what do you think of Amonkhet?
The same. They swayed me a little bit. They printed a bunch of zombies, which are pretty good. But we got the two remaining gods, probably the more powerful of the gods we've seen. And then we got Nissa, the X-costed Planeswalker. So there's a lot of interesting cards going on. I'm going to say I'm slightly more excited about Amonkhet this week than I was last week. I'm really excited for Amonkhet in a casual sense. Commander cards galore everywhere. And we got a few cards that people are thinking are modern playable. So power level wise, I think it's pretty decent, but I'm still not feeling these white mummies. I don't know about this Amonkhet flavor. Watching the panel made me like Amonkhet even less for some reason. We can discuss about that when we talk about the panel. But in terms of actual cards and what I'm going to play in standard and modern, I think the set is pretty good. I think it just misses a bit on the flavor, even though it has embalm and bricks and mummies and stuff.
Fair enough. Seth, what do you think?
For me, I think the set really turned around during the second week of spoilers. Like, I still see the flavor concerns that Richard has mentioned, so I still can see that aspect of it. But last week, I was pretty concerned about power level and just the overall competitiveness of the cards. And it seems like the second week of spoilers had a lot of the best stuff in the set. It had arguably the best gods. It had probably the most competitive Planeswalker, a bunch of other stuff that seems like it has potential in standard. So I went from kind of like lukewarm, I guess, on its actual playability to pretty excited. So I don't know. I was not expecting, I think part of what got me, and this is something I want to ask both of you about, but normally Wizards kind of front-loaded spoiler season, where at the beginning we got a lot of the good stuff, and in the first week we had like almost all the mythics, and we kind of had all the good cards, and the second week was kind of the fill-in. This week it was kind of the opposite. They really paced out the spoilers, so the second week was really where we got the most exciting stuff, and I kind of liked it that way. And if I'm expecting that next spoiler season, I think it'll be a good thing. But I was expecting that Wizards would spoil all the good stuff first. So when we got all these kind of bad mythics and not that exciting stuff, I was a little nervous, but it definitely turned around.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same camp you are, Seth. I was already excited week one, and then week two, it kind of just seemed like we got a lot more stuff to be excited about. And to really quickly touch upon your question, I've kind of been used to that for a long time, that, you know, spoilers and previews were kind of ramping up right up until the pre-release. So for me, it's nothing new. And I've always really liked that approach, because, you know, when you dump everything and then you have all the good stuff, and then the second week, or, you know, up until the pre-release is a bunch of like draft chafe and, you know, not very exciting stuff. It's kind of like takes the wind out of the sails right before everyone's supposed to get excited and go and pre-release and enjoy themselves. So I think this approach is much more effective, and it kind of reignites everybody's excitement for a set, doing it that way. But I think keeping in line, like just looking at the entire list, like they kept in line with another really great batch of like uncommons. I mean, I don't even I know people are going to like gloss over these, but I mean, like Wayward Servant, the Kenra Charioteer, the Honor Crop Captain, like there's a lot of great uncommons that were revealed, and I'm like, wow, that is pretty good. And then obviously going from there, we got the Green God, and I'm like super happy about. Can't tell you how happy I am about this, about Ronas. So thanks, Magic Mikes, for that. And then the Invocation. I have a question for you after you get to, for you and Richard, Seth. After you get to answer, Richard, like to me, it seemed like the only Invocation that was green ended up being like the best looking one, and maybe it's just because I'm biased, but it looked like the green bands and like the general like green on the card like kind of brought it all together, and maybe it's just because of the art too, but I thought it looked great for the Invocation version of Ronus. But I'll pass it off to you, Richard. But yeah, I'm with you, Seth. I'm really into this set, and I think the second week really brought some awesome cards on all levels, like uncommons, rares. We got the gods, so there's a lot to be excited for.
So before we get into the cards, I actually like the old pacing better, where you front load it with the good stuff, because it actually builds the hype. But I don't think Wizards intentionally tried to backload the hype. I think Invocations were supposed to be, like, oh my god, the end of the world, yes, new frames, and they just kind of fell flat on that, because I think the Invocations were supposed to be the big bang that the set started off on. But Invocations aside, I agree with Chaz. The more you look at the Invocations, the better they look. I actually like the gods. The only downside is still the original downside, which is Hazaret the Perverted. It's a little hard to read the titles. But let's talk about some cards. So we'll start off with the best card according to Chaz, Ronus the Indomitable. Probably the best god. 2 and a green, 5/5, Death Touch indestructible, can't attack or block unless you control another creature with power 4 or greater. Pay 2 and a green, another target creature gets +2/+0 and gains trample until end of turn.
Yeah, I was completely for it. I mean, this is nothing like Nylea. Obviously, it's a mana less in terms of casting costs. Death Touch, actually, I know sometimes it doesn't make sense to have like a giant creature with Death Touch, but when it's indestructible and you have cards like Prey Upon lurking around in the format, like that's some really interesting removal now that you can consider when you're deck building. And this is easily the condition that's the easiest to meet. I mean, its own ability provides creatures to, you up their power, so now Ronus can attack with these creatures. I just think it's a really great, like, all-in-one package for a god, and I think this has the best shot by far to be a constructed playable one of the god cycle. So I'm super happy. I'm glad it was the green god, because I did not want to be disappointed, because the other gods are cool and all, but I'm sticking with Ronus to be something I want to play if I sit down and play Standard, because it's great.
I think it's good. I don't know if I'm as hyped as everyone else is. I think it is the easiest to turn on, so that's a big vote in favor of it. It is also kind of intensive mana-wise. If you want to like play as Servant of the Conduit on turn 2 and then turn on your Ronus on turn 4, you kind of have to spend your entire turn pumping up your Servant to attack, and maybe that's fine. So I think it probably is the most easily played of the gods. I'm not convinced it's the most powerful. I think in the right deck, some of the other ones have potential to be better, including one that we'll probably talk about later today. But I think it definitely is the most likely to see play just because the condition is so easy to meet. And even disregarding Death Touch, which honestly doesn't do a whole lot on the card, it's still a 5/5 indestructible for 3. And with it being easy to turn on, it's a pretty scary beater. It's kind of a Gideon that's active all the time in your deck. And Gideon has proven itself to be very difficult to deal with. So I'm definitely scared of this card.
I'm with Chaz. I think this is good. I agree with Seth that you might not just slot it into every standard deck, but I'm going to try this card in Modern. As crazy as that sounds, where Death Touch becomes relevant. You throw it into Abzan. Everyone's on the Fatal Push plan now, so indestructibility looks better because you have less path to exiles. Death Touch lets you get through 5/6 Goyfs, 13/13 Death Shadows, and its pumping ability is relevant. Even if it comes down and it doesn't turn on, just giving a Lingering Souls token +2/+0 is a good plan B. So I'm excited to try it in Abzan. Maybe it's terrible. Maybe it's a win more card. If you have a Goyf on the field, do you really need another one? But with Goyf, Grim players, even Bob, you can pump up Bob to turn this thing on. So I'm excited to try it in Modern. And if I'm trying it in Modern, it's probably playable in Standard. You have Gear Hulks. You can crew vehicles, right? Even if Ronus doesn't turn on, you can still crew a Heart of Kiran. You can go for the combo kill of Toolcraft Exemplar, some 1-drop that crews Heart of Kiran, and then just slam in with Ronus Heart of Kiran, pump up the Heart of Kiran for more trouble, and just put the beat down on people. The one downside is Chump City with Ronus. You can't give itself +2/+0 and trample. So that's the only downside I see, besides actually turning him on. But I like Ronus, and I think we might see him in other formats, or at least I'll try. And if I 5-0 a Modern daily, I'll be sure to let you know.
Nice. Richard, high five on that one. Yeah, I mean, you're not the only one. I have seen that other people are kind of intrigued to test this out as on curve. You drop a Goyf, it's pretty easy to turn on Ronus at that point. Like you said, even Bob. I'm eagerly awaiting seeing your results with this card and anyone else that tries this in Modern. But I think you're right. If people are considering this, and they've considered other cards before for Modern that never panned out, but I think this has a pretty good shot. And if that's the case, I think you're right. It's really no question for Standard. And I do agree with the one point that you did bring up, Seth, is that it doesn't just kind of slot in as a 4 of in every single deck. But from what I see, it actually does work well with a plethora of other cards, and actually works well with Hazoret the Fervent. Coming down a turn earlier, Hazoret can also... They play really well with each other.
Oh god, not multiple gods in the same deck. Where you can have 4 creatures on the battlefield that none can attack or block, and you're I don't know, man.
Well, no. I mean, if you even just curve into a Nuke, I think Nuke's Constrictor really turns on a lot of stuff these days. So
any god turns on Ronus, so that's okay. But all the other gods require very very difficult things. Speaking of other gods,
go ahead.
Bantu the Glorified. So the black one, 2 and a black, 4/6. Everyone's favorite black keyword, menace. Indestructible. Bantu the Glorified can't attack or block unless a creature died under your control this turn. 1 and a black, sacrifice another creature, scry 1. Each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life.
Menace, Seth! Woo! Yeah! You wrote about this card, brewing with Amonkhet. I actually really love the deck list that you posted, and for some reason, I was reading, and I think this card's getting a lot more hate than it deserves. I thought it was pretty good. It's not over the top. This has to be in every deck that can play black. I do think it's an engine card, but a pretty decent one at that. It's not terrible.
I think this has potential to be the most powerful of all the gods. And that might sound kind of crazy. It's one of the most narrow. It's probably the most narrow god. It goes in a really specific deck. You got to be playing like an aristocrat self-sacrifice style of deck. But in that one style of deck, this card is going to be super good. It gets in damage. As much as I hate Menace as a mechanic, it's actually pretty relevant on this card. It makes it hard to chump. And if you can get in a couple of hits, it doesn't take that many sacrifices to drain your opponent out of the game. There's some really good sacrifice outlets in Standard. So I think there's like a tiny percentage of decks that can actually play this card. But in that tiny percentage of decks, this is going to be extremely powerful.
Yes, if the deck is a thing, and this is the main engine piece, but I'm not even sure this is the best card in that deck. Because the sacrifice outlet where you have to pay 2 mana is not a very good sacrifice outlet usually. So it could be a role player in the deck, and maybe it's because you actually need like sack outlet 3 or 4 to make the deck consistent. But I think I'd rather just play like an Eiley or something as opposed to Bantu if I had the choice, right? So I don't know, but if you can make an aristocrats deck, the deck itself is very powerful, and having sack outlets lets it go. So yeah, maybe beating down with your 4/6 Menace is enough. You know, they run out of creatures, they can no longer chump, and then you just drain them the rest of the way. So I can see it working. But I'm gonna stick with Mronis as the most powerful god still. I'm not on the Bantu trade. But I agree that, you know, there are uses, and Bantu is probably the second or third best god, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a close second, probably tied with Hazoret at this point. But I mean, Seth, you brought up a lot of good points, and I mean, trust me, I'm definitely with Richard firmly on the Ronas train. But I mean, I just love that it's a bit like, short of Ronas, like, this is pretty easy to turn on too. And you have to remember, like, there's a lot of creatures that can easily be reanimated. I mean, Richard made a great point last week about Liliana's Death Majesty kind of being like the zombie planeswalker. Well, this is definitely like the zombie god. So what better way to turn this on than playing a bunch of creatures that never die anyway? I mean, we're talking prized amalgams. What's the other one from Eldritch Moon? The Haunted Dead. Like, there's a lot of stuff that can come back, and potentially just keep giving you reusable triggers.
The other thing to consider with both of these cards in terms of Modern is 3 mana does mean they could be like one-ofs in Collected Company decks.
Yes.
They can be Court of Calling targets. So I think that both the black and green god automatically have more potential just because they could slot into an existing deck as a one-of. They don't have to like create their whole own archetype in Modern. You can just throw this in as a core target, either one of them. And honestly, Ronas is probably the more likely that you just play as a one-of in one of those decks to tutor up in the right situation. But either one of them could fill that role in Modern.
Yeah, this is the time where being a creature all the time is working hugely to their advantage. But I do agree. It's a spicy, like, one of. I mean, it could happen. It's not hard to have. I mean, basically they already have like 3 power or 4 power anyway. So some of these 3 drops. But yeah, I mean, Ronas' ability makes it real easy, and Bantu as well. So I think it's like 1A, 1B, and then like Hazoret and the rest come in.
All right, let's move on to a unique planeswalker we received. Nissa, Steward of Elements. Guess what? Nissa's back. How many Nissas do we have in Standard now? A lot.
7?
Yeah, like 5.
X, green, blue. You heard it. X. Comes in with X loyalty. Planeswalker Nissa. +2, scry 2. 0, look at the top cards of your library. If it's a land card or a creature card with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of loyalty counters on Nissa, you may put that card onto the battlefield. -6, up to 2 target lands you control, or untap up to 2 target lands you control. They become 5/5 elemental creatures with flying and haste until end of turn. They're still lands.
I mean, this card is. I mean, I know it's green, and I might be biased, but this could do some crazy stuff, even outside of Standard. I already heard like rumblings, like, I don't know, Richard, maybe you could weigh in on this, but like lands or something like that. I don't know, maybe this is a win more, but seems pretty easy to just keep an engine card like this out on the battlefield. But I will reserve the right to kind of hold back on stuff outside of Standard. In Standard, this could certainly get there. I mean, I don't know where yet, but I feel like it's a build-around card, but even at 3 mana, because you can do that, still pretty decent. Doesn't really protect itself as much as I would like, but yeah, you kind of have to protect it on your own, which maybe, but does powerful stuff.
Yeah, it's just so flexible. There's not many planeswalkers. I mean, obviously, being the first X planeswalker, I guess it's the only planeswalker that you can literally cast on turn 2 off of a mana dork for 3 mana and have it be really good. And it's also insane if you can cast it for like 8 mana and immediately ultimate and essentially just Searing Wind your opponent for 10 damage in the air out of nowhere. There's just so much flexibility. The not protecting itself is a concern. I don't know if that's going to be the nail in the coffin, but it's definitely something to be aware of. But I think this card is really strong, mostly because it's just very rarely bad. No matter how much how much mana you put into this card, it's going to be decent on its spot on the curve, no matter what you cast it for. So I'm definitely excited for it and think it has a lot of potential.
Agreed. You are going to be spending money and mana on it. So.
I really like Nissa because of design. This is another unique planeswalker. We were 3 for 3 on unique planeswalkers that don't look like Obnixilis, so that's good. I don't know how good she is. She's gonna do weird things. Like you can do Nissatron in Modern. Like I don't know why you would do this, but like you can Nissatron and just ultimate her. And I think the ultimate is where the real power lies. I think the 0 is actually pretty bad. I think the 0 is like draw a card. Because if you don't have Brainstorm, you don't have a way to manipulate outside that Scry 2. It's like you're just spinning the wheel and you might get a land or something. So it's okay, but I think the real power is people just putting this down and ultimating twice or ultimating Scry ultimate or something. And the ultimate is what you play around. And other than that, it's also Simic. You got to play Simic, which typically isn't that strong of a combination. But I expect it to be broken in other formats. Like maybe you see a Tron variant for some reason, or for some reason you see this in Vintage. I don't know. Like in other formats where you get broken mana, you might see this, but I don't know why. But having X loyalty is a pretty interesting thing. And of course, in EDH, you have doubling season. So good luck.
There you go. Only need, you play it at 5, you get a Searing Wind. And I think it really sets right on this one. Great points. I mean, it really is just so flexible, and you brought that up too, Richard. And I mean, Searing Wind in these colors is pretty crazy when you don't have to spend like 10 mana. It's not that hard to get to 6 mana. But I mean, we'll see. The Simic colors, you're right, Richard, like is not always the best. I feel like that's a positive outside of Standard. But in Standard, I mean, there's Chain or Initiate. There's ways like you can build around this so it's protected and you have a great engine card. And I think when people kind of look past the immediate, like it doesn't protect itself, and you use this more of like a finisher, or you play it kind of in the mid game to build up to that really quickly, because it does get +2, and that is pretty that's a considerable plus when you only have to spend 6 to get an ultimate.
All right, should we talk about some of our favorite cards from the set? I think those are the 3 major spoilers we wanted to cover.
Sure, yeah. Let's just kind of talk about this set as a whole. So, all right, Seth. I gotta ask. I've been dying to ask since like now that we see the full spoiler. Do you feel any different about Aftermath?
No.
Okay.
I do not. I mean, we did get potentially maybe the better of the Aftermath cards in the second week in the Ruinous Path one. I'm trying to remember the name. Never to Return. That's actually return. You're not happy to play Ruinous Path, but it's a card that you put in your deck because you gotta. But I'm still not impressed with Aftermath in general. The second week didn't really change my opinion of the mechanic, and I still think it's pretty bad, especially when you consider the cost of building a whole new border and the complexity and all that stuff that goes into the mechanic. I think that I wanted it to be better if you were going to literally change how Magic card looks to make this mechanic.
I've been thinking about this a lot, especially when we've seen the entire set, and Richard mentioned it again, and I wanted to bring it up on this podcast now that like we're all here and talking about it. I like the design, like I like them taking chances with design, so I don't want to like downplay that. I love the rest of the set, so don't get me wrong. I love the rest of the set, but I do think that Aftermath cards, like you have a point set, and I think this is the only part of the set that I believe is kind of gumming up the works when Richard is talking about like the flavor. Like I don't see how this kind of fit in. I think this is like these are the only cards to me that don't make sense when it comes to flavor. Everything else, it kind of seems like fine. You can make an argument for it. There's like pyramids, there's monuments, there's like gates to afterlife, and alludes to another card.
This is actually the most flavorful mechanic when you hear them describe it. And the idea is on Amonkhet, everything, there is an afterlife, and it has a lot of impact in day-to-day life, and spells can now also be cast from the dead, which is basically Aftermath. So you cast the front half, and then from the underworld you cast the second half. So that was the explanation they gave for this mechanic on the preview stream. But I'm with you guys, I don't like it. And I think I don't like it because there's too much limited in my constructed. All of these cards must be rares, because they all just straight up 2 for 1, if not 3 for 1 or 4 for 1. So you can't have too many of these floating around. So they put it up rare. But then if you're opening a pack and you're like, well, it's like a giant growth or something at rare, are you very excited? And you're not, right? So I think it's the rarity that gets me on these cards. If they were commons or uncommons, it wouldn't be too bad. But there's just so many rares that don't look like rares. And I'm not sure why we have this, because we had flashback cards before, and we had plenty of flashback cards at common and uncommon, and those two are also 2 for 1s. So I don't know. And yeah, good luck explaining to new players why there's a card in a card and you got to turn it sideways to read. And like, is this really an instant or a sorcery? How does this work with Gear Hulk? What's the converted mana cost? Like, they should just put reminder text for how like all of this works on the back of the card, because you're gonna need a paragraph to explain this to new players.
Yeah, I think like I just honed in on that, and I feel like the rest of the set great, and I get you're absolutely right. We were going to talk about the preview stream, so that kind of coincides with what we're talking about. But you're absolutely right, Richard. Like, they explained it, and I get it, and I know it's like they're kind of doing it's like embalmed for spells, but I think it just kind of missed the mark. Now, there are a couple of them that I do think are good enough. Me personally, if I was playing an aggressive list, like Prepare to Fight might be something to look at. So they're not all completely terrible, but I think that's like I think that's it. Like, I think that's the one specific part of the set that just didn't work, and it kind of fails on that, like on multiple levels when it comes to story and flavor and all that stuff. So I think hopefully I answered it. I got it for you, Richard.
I understand their justification from the stream. I just don't understand why they couldn't have just done flashback and said, on Amonkhet, like, things come back from the graveyard.
They need new mechanics, Seth. They need new mechanics to sell sets.
They do.
Yeah, I guess
I would have been happy with them, like
the 3-sided card where to cast it you gotta fold it into like origami, and then you like throw it up, and like they're running out of space, design space, right? Like, there's only so much you can do on a piece of cardboard, and they're starting to try new things, which we get cool things and then we get weird things like this. So I don't know, they're just gonna keep trying, and there's only so many new ways you can keep making Magic cards after 25 years.
Sure. I mean, there's another. I mean, like I said, we had the entire set in front of us. I think there's some really key, solid like players here. I mean, like I said earlier in the cast, like some of the uncommons are like incredible. I can't wait to play with Hepatra, the Vizier of Poisons, and EDH. I think that's pretty interesting. Like, there's all these interesting cards, like Samut, Voice of Dissent. I don't think we didn't have that card the last time we talked about. It's like so many. If you want to play Commander, maybe even Standard, like there's just so many keywords on that card. Like, how could it possibly be bad? Wait, I don't know. I'm liking a lot of this. We got a Minotaur legend. Like, we have so much other cool stuff. And then I just had to bring up the Aftermath stuff because it's like everything else is pretty sweet.
Yeah, I think it looks like a very fun commander set, and I am becoming more optimistic on its chances of being good in standard. The other thing I wanted to point out, which is kind of exciting to me, and this sort of again ties into the panel they did, but we got to see some realistic answers. Like, it's not 100% where we want it to be, but Wizards does look like they really made an effort to put cards in the set to fight against artifacts, more so than they clearly had in Kaladesh block, and even maybe more so than a lot of other sets. It seems like they went out of their way to make sure there were good artifact answers, and they even put some graveyard answers in, which is almost surprising considering that this is a graveyard set. And one of the things they've been doing recently is like, hey, we don't want to like hose a block within the block. We got to wait till the next block. And they kind of walk that back to some extent with some graveyard disruption, even if it's, not insane graveyard disruption, but at least it exists in standard. So I think that there's some encouraging signs as far as what we have been talking about over the last year or so about having better answers in standard as well.
Yeah, I think if we're shifting gears, so really what the specific part of the preview stream with Marrow and Marshall Sutcliffe, if anyone watched that over the weekend, what Seth is specifically referring to is there was a segment where, I believe it was Marrow, right?
I think it was one of the other people that actually said it.
I can't remember their name.
Director or something like that. I don't remember his name either, but
yeah, that they were compiling data from Pro Tour Aether Revolt before Amonkhet was even finished. So looking at it big picture, I think the timeline of design isn't what we as players thought it was, and maybe it wasn't. It's either two things, and we discussed this prior to the cast, that just the timeline of design isn't what we thought it was, and Wizards has been pretty tight-lipped about this right up until that panel, because I've never heard of that before. Like, I understand deep within the design, like in the design timeline, like cards change, but this is like 6 months, maybe not even, and it just seems like a coincidence that all these cards, like Magma Spray and Manglehorn, what is that card?
Yeah, Manglehorn.
Manglehorn. Like, suddenly show up. I don't think that's by coincidence. Maybe they threw that in there. Like, they had the ability to throw that in last second. Or it could be, Richard brought up an amazing point. I think it was a few weeks back when we were talking about this, that he just brought up the question, like, maybe Wizards has to change their design schedule and not, like, lock in sets, like, 2 years at a time. So maybe that's what we're seeing sped up until now, because another point that you brought up, Seth, and we talked about is, we mentioned this again, maybe that same week, is they're kind of bringing back the Gatewatch as early as Hour of Devastation, and that wasn't data that was collected 2 years ago. That was data that was collected pretty recently. So it seems that either the design space or the timeline has shifted, or it just wasn't what we thought it was, and that they do actually have right up until X point to change certain cards in the set. Because, like you just said, Seth, like, suddenly now all these cards like just pop up, and it just seems to me that they've been pretty tight-lipped about this, to not say, hey, listen, guys, it is there were some mistakes, but we do have some stuff like right around the corner.
Yeah, I think for me, that was the biggest thing I took away from that whole panel, because the old time frame, and we had this huge conversation about answers and fixing standard a few weeks ago, and one of the big things we said was it just takes so long, and that goes back to what Richard said about speeding it up, but it's pretty interesting to realize that's not the case, and that means that there's a lot more flexibility. Standard, when it might not be as good as it could be, or when it has problems, theoretically, within a set, or definitely two sets, Wizards has the ability, if they wanted to, we could have Pithing Needle in Hour of Devastation based off of feedback they were getting this month or the month before. Like, it seems like the time frame is a quarter of what we were thinking it was before, which is actually pretty exciting, and it means there is a lot more potential for things to change quickly than we had previously thought, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, so I agree with you guys, but this was not my biggest takeaway from the previous stream. My biggest takeaway was I figured out what rubbed me wrong in Amonkhet. And it was the point where Maro said mummies are white because they serve. And that just gave me like horrendous flashbacks to Kaladesh because dwarves are white because they cooperate or whatever like BS white color slice trait you put in there. And I think that's the problem, right? When you think of mummy in your head, you don't think of like servitude, right? You think of like some like scary thing from Egypt. When you think dwarves, you don't think, you know, a bunch of people cooperating building stuff. You think in the mountain, armor, weapons, forge, whatever, right? And because there's 5 colors, every set, every block, they need to, you know, give equal representation to the 5 colors. They start warping some of the things to make them fit. Dwarves was the most egregious, I think. I don't think anyone remembers their dwarves in Kaladesh. Everyone hates dwarves because of the way they portrayed them, not because we just intrinsically hate dwarves. It's because of the way they portrayed them in Kaladesh is not, you know, our dwarven vigilantes that we remembered from the earlier years. And kind of the same thing happened with mummies. So when you have to explain to me why mummies are white, I think, you know, that's bad design. When you have to explain why aftermath is a flavorful mechanic, I think they failed again. Like these things should be inherent and kind of enforce the stereotypes we have in our head, which is maybe a bad thing. Maybe that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to break stereotypes, but it's just not what we as players expect. And when we say we want an Egyptian block, we have an idea of what we want, and then they go around and say, well, mummies are actually nice and orderly and they serve and they're your best friends. And we're like, well, that's not what I learned growing up watching movies, right? So I think that was kind of the mental disconnect, which is why Amonkhet feels a bit off. Kaladesh kind of had that fixed. It had enough other awesome things that everyone just forgot dwarves existed. But with Amonkhet, it's like, I don't know. Mummies aren't as cool as I thought they were. So that's what I took away from the stream.
Yeah. And
servitude.
I mean, it's funny that both statements were kind of like a throw in there in a like what an hour and a half stream or something like that. So, but I think the good thing there's good thing, and of course, Richard, like, can I say like without having them explore, you know, moving some of these zombies into white to kind of play off the whole mummy thing, like maybe we wouldn't have got Wayward Servant. Like, I like the card. I'm glad it exists, but I can understand the kind of issue there. I just think like this is a classic. They want to do all these things. They want to kind of go above and beyond what's on the cardboard, but it's hard to convey that on a piece of cardboard at the end of the day when you present someone with a card that's designed to be played with and you're like, hey, look at all this stuff, like look at all these things that we were thinking of, like zombies and mummies mean like servitude and this, that, and the other thing. Like you can't convey that on a card. And I get the fact that all these things have to go into it, but sometimes they just don't pan out the way you expect them to when you present like these cards for consideration, and players have to kind of just look at these like, why is this white? Like that will be the first thing that just comes out of a player's mouth, and it makes sense because it happens in game design all the time. It's like you're thinking about all these things, and then you present something, and it's like the first thing is like, why is this like this? And if you have to like go on to like a 2-hour tangent to figure like to explain it to somebody, they're just kind of looking at the cards like, yeah. I don't know.
They got to go back to old school design, like
right.
Red crazy, blue smart, black evil, white holy. like they're trying to go away from that to not, you know, enforce stereotypes and stuff like that. And now it's like, I don't know. I was like, just don't mess with my zombies, please. Like I swear to God, in like 2 years we're gonna have green zombies. It's like, well, zombies, take the power of nature and corrupt it or something. And now, like, I don't know, man.
I mean, didn't they kind of already do that with Ravnica? Like, there was like these bio zombies and they were like plant zombies. So they kind of already did that, didn't they?
Yeah.
Or did that slip past you?
Right? Lorwyn took the elves and like messed up all the elves. It was like, no, give me Lord of the Rings, man. Like, what are you doing? Like Lord of the Rings, Legolas, come on.
So I get it, but I think outside of that, I mean, it's a huge deal to learn that information on a stream. I was kind of hoping that they would push that a little more, because that's pretty significant news. I mean, all things considered and all joking aside, that maybe they really did change the design out timeline, and maybe it's exactly what Richard said, that they were like, hey, look, if we have to change standard, we can't be locking in sets like 2 years or a year and a half down the line. We have to like make changes if we need to as early as like a few months, Seth, like, because that puts it at like less than 6 months.
Yeah, that seems unrealistic, but maybe they were just talking and they mixed up the sets in their minds because they're working so far in the future. You know what I mean? Like, when we're podcasting and we say something, and then afterwards,
Right.
like, oh wait, I totally said that wrong, but like, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like, because 6 months, like, how do you even print the stuff in time? So
I don't know.
Yeah.
So maybe the times are a bit crossed, but we definitely got a lot more answers.
Yes.
And we're gonna have to see the next couple of sets to see if it's consistent. Hopefully we don't get any GTAs. Those last minute changes sometimes end up not so good.
Yes.
But I like the
Yes.
hate we saw. Like, the graveyard hate is very like specific. Exile 1 card, exile 2 up to 3 cards. We don't have the rest in peace, sorry, like no graveyard. Or we don't have the stony silence, sorry, no artifacts. We kind of just have like targeted hate. And it's pretty good because a lot of it cycles, which makes it even more interesting. So I actually like the direction they took the hate. And I'm definitely not a fan of Rest in Peace or Stony Silence, especially not going against the core mechanics of the set, because you basically can't play those mechanics anymore if you have those overarching, hate cards.
Yeah. So, conclusion. I mean, I felt that there's an overwhelming amount of stuff to combat a deck like Vehicles. But I just, and we talked about this, Seth, over the weekend. I mean, maybe it's something we haven't talked about and maybe articulated as well, because we've always talked about answers. But I think it's pertinent to talk about it now that, like, you don't really print answers for something like Saheeli Cat combo, and there's a pretty good defining precedent for that, because they banned Splinter Twin in Modern, because I don't think there's really anything you can do about such an efficient combo that just fits into an already efficient deck. Like, you're getting destroyed by Rogue Refiners and just value stuff, and then they could just, if you somehow manage to overcome that uphill battle, they could just throw down a 2-card combo and it's over. So that's kind of always how it felt with Twin, and everybody. That's exactly why it got banned, because, I mean, look, it's the precedent. There was a great deck, and it was just a 2-card combo that you pretty much couldn't stop. So they could print all the answers they want. I just don't think it'll ever be efficient, because I look at Trespasser's Curse. That's pretty great, but then you brought up the fact that, like, there's already a 1-mana card in Authority of the Consuls, and that does absolutely nothing when they're still able to play efficient cards like Rogue Refiner, stuff like that. And yeah, you neutralize one aspect of the deck, but that's not even the entire aspect of the deck.
Yeah, they have to ban Felidar Guardian next week. That's what it comes down to.
We're already here. We've already got fast and loose with their bannings.
If they ban Felidar Guardian, Standard will be awesome. And I think it'll be great, and it'll be a really fun format. If they don't, I think it will be very disappointing. And the reason they have to ban Felidar Guardian isn't so much because it's too good, even though it is. In the combo, it's too good, and the deck's too good. But they've already admitted it's a mistake. They already admitted we wouldn't have put this in Standard if we knew that this was a thing. So I think that's their out. Like, they're not just, this isn't the Emrakul banning or Reflector Mage banning. This is we made a mistake. We admitted that we missed this combo, and we wouldn't have allowed this combo in the format if we knew it was a thing. So I think that's how they can justify this without setting a precedent. This is Skull Clamp that they're banning, a card that they just messed up and it's too broken, and it's not just like format's bad.
Reflector Mage argument. Well, Saheeli's not even the best deck in the format. If you ban that thing, then you got to take something from Mardu Vehicles, Heart of Kuran. Well, but then the next deck needs something, and then you end up banning another 3 cards.
This might sound counterintuitive, but I think banning Felidar Guardian makes Mardu worse. Because if you ban Felidar Guardian, then you can play Magma Spray instead of Shock to beat Mardu vehicles. You can play Artifact Hate to deal with Mardu vehicles. So I think that Mardu comes back to the field by banning Felidar Guardian. I think that getting rid of that combo makes everything good in Standard, including fixing Mardu vehicles.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. And you can play something which, like Manglehorn, which is pretty decently efficient on its own, and you can main deck that with no problem without having to worry about, it stops the Healy combo, but it does a pretty big number on vehicles as well. And you're absolutely right. Like, being able to now just jam Magma Spray without having to worry about, shocking a Saheeli so they don't combo is a pretty big deal. And you can, let's just say the deck continues to be around and they just adopts, more value cards. Magma Spray is still good against all their creatures too, like Rogue Refiner and stuff like that. So I think you're right. You're onto something there. And I just look at something like which card is it? Vizier of Deferment. Like, that's probably something that Felidar Guardian should have been, and Felidar Guardian just kind of slipped through, I think.
Yeah, I think even if Felidar Guardian just didn't say Planeswalkers, it probably would have been okay. Or if it wasn't in the format with Saheeli, it would have been okay. It's just so many weird things happen to go wrong to make this a combo. So
but you think it's Guardian instead of Saheeli?
I think that Saheeli would be the better banning. I just can't see Wizards banning an uncommon or banning a mythic Planeswalker when they could ban an uncommon and have roughly the same effect. But I think Standard would be fun with Felidar Guardian and not Saheeli. I think that deck might even still exist without the combo, just as a value sort of 3-4 color Planeswalker deck where you're blinking Rogue Refiners and playing Chandras, but without the combo hanging over your head. I think it might actually be fun and fairly fair. So I think that banning Saheeli would make a more fun format. I just can't picture Wizards banning a Planeswalker over an uncommon.
Yeah, because you could jam Vizier of Deferment and remove Felidar Guardian. I do think that deck can stick around.
Yeah, so, I think the value plan is good.
Final point. I know Richard hates it, but Seth, you also talked about, and I really like your brewing article. I hope you have another one?
There probably will be another one, maybe next week or the week after. So
awesome. I know at the very beginning you were like, I don't know if zombies can adopt white. I think there's some pretty good choices, and a card like Time to Reflect we were not privy to last week. That's a really powerful card.
Oh man, I hate that card. I think that's the most overrated card in Amonkhet.
What?
You got to be a white zombie deck. Then you got to have zombie on the battlefield. Then you got to have someone attack into or block your zombie. You need so many conditions, and then you get a condemn out of the deal. It just seems like you need so many things to go right for that to be good. I think if
people are hyped about this condemn.
I've probably been asked.
I thought it was pretty decent.
More than any other card, really. I kind of want to just do an entire article. So many people ask me about this card.
Wow. I mean, I don't think it's the end of all days, but I think it's pretty a good option now that you can consider white. I mean, what about the two? You made a list based on these cards. The Wayward Servant's pretty solid.
Yeah, I think it's zombies are interesting. I'm excited for zombies just because there's so many different ways you can build zombies, from mono black to 3-color to graveyard based to black white. So it'll be a lot more fun once we have the cards and we can actually start testing them. I don't think we can figure out the right build on paper. I think we got to get the cards and start just jamming games with different zombie builds and see what rises to the top.
Yeah. I want to move on, but oh man, I can't wait to start building. Green is so strong. And as many ways.
Green for the last 2 years.
I know, but look how many cards. You have Ronas, you have Crocodile of the Crossing, you have some really sweet pump spells like Shed Weakness, and what was the other one? Hepatra's Cure, I think. There's so many good cards. Exemplar Strength. You have Channeler Initiate. You have Honored Hydra is actually pretty decent. I kind of wrote that card off. Who's gonna play that card? It's Roar of the Worm. We had Roar of the Worm had its time. I don't think that's as good as as it used to be. But then like you realize it's a 4-mana 6/6 trample, and it's actually pretty easy to discard it because you have like the 2-mana Minotaur. Like, I can't wait to start brewing with green. Like, there's so many ways you could build around like red-green monsters or Jund or something like that. Like, I'm really happy. There's so many like massively efficient creatures. I can't wait.
Isn't Magic?
I'm doing the 8-god list just for you, Richard. Going 4 Hazaret, 4 Ronas. It's gonna work.
I think
Who's Constrictor's gonna get me there?
It's bad.
What?
Yeah, I think we got to go back to the old days. The old days where you get like, I don't know, 6-mana 6/4s, and that's your best card.
But
speaking
Seth,
of old days, the 2-mana red bear. So we went from like never having a bear at all to having a bear with crazy upside in red in the span of like, I don't know, 6 months.
I'm waiting. Come on, Red needed this.
Lions.
Red needed this. Come on.
I'm waiting for the 1-mana 3/3 green 1-drop. It's coming.
Yeah,
I am too.
Probably soon.
I mean, it's funny you say that green should be bad, but you wrote an article on like one of the very first successful Pro Tour deck lists with spiders. All right, so green's been good for a long time, my friend. 2 4s or what? Wait, what was it? Trapdoor Spider and like 3 5s that could block. Sarah Angel, no problem. Like.
That article was about the worst deck ever to win a Pro Tour. Just to be clear.
Hey, you want to win the Pro Tour? Or do you want to say your deck's bad? I'll take the trophy. And your $500, which they probably paid you back then. Maybe not even that. All right. Did we cover everything? Oh yeah. So the split card change and the Moto stuff. Let's talk about that so we don't lose that for a third week in a row. So the split change and fuse card rule that they changed. So Matt Tabak and I think it was Trick, and there was an article posted that the shenanigans of flashing back and playing these expertise cards with these fuse cards like costing. You could cast both sides, even though if one side costs like 6, as long as you're good on the other end. They kind of put the whole kibosh on that. So if you have any more particulars, you can say that. But that's pretty much the gist of it. Yeah.
So real quick, overall, I think it's probably a good change because the old rule isn't great. I am disappointed that we're losing cool, unique things. Like, it's a neat way to play Magic. It's different than a lot of decks. My biggest problem, though, is when Aether Revolt came out, they literally spoiled the expertise cycle with articles talking about this interaction and how this interaction was going to maybe shake up Modern, and it was a great thing. So I know I might just be being cynical, but I wish they had just announced it back then. It almost feels to me like they knew that these cards were coming and they were going to have to change the rule, but instead of just changing the rule, or at least not hyping it, they hyped it up to make expertises sound exciting. And then knowing that they were going to have to like ban this interaction, or they were going to ban this interaction a couple of months later. So that's the part I didn't like. I wish they had just announced this back when Aether Revolt came out.
Maybe it hadn't decided yet, but I like this change. It's one of those weird gotchas on new players where you're like, oh no, actually, even though this says like 7, the converted mana cost is like 2, and I gotcha. And then they got to call a judge, and they don't believe the judge. You got to search Gatherer, and it's just really weird. So I like that. I wish there was just reminder text on these cards. Like the converted mana cost of this card is, X plus Y while it's in the graveyard or whatever. But yes, for making things more clear and reasonable rather than, basically a more legal form of rules lawyering someone, right? Like knowing weird interactions and using them to your advantage. There just happen to be entire decks made out of them. This is much better, I think.
Okay, question for both of you. How is this different than casting Gifts Ungiven to search for Grizzlebrand in Unburial Rites? Because Gifts Ungiven says search your library for 4 cards. I've had new players literally comment to me, like, you can't do that. It says 4 cards. That's not legal, in response to deck text and stuff. So how is that? Like, how far do you go down the path?
Hold on, wait. What does the real text of Gifts say, though?
I don't know. If you read the literal card, it says search your library for 4 cards.
Yeah, that's just the
different names.
old printing. Yeah, the old printing is search your library for 4 cards. The modern Masters printing is search your library for up to 4 cards.
Okay.
So they errated it, or I don't know, they just made it more clear.
Okay.
So that is just an artifact of having paper cards printed like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense then.
I do like this kind of movement of cleaning up a lot of these obscure rules, and I think Richard nailed it. It's like it's very hard to explain. It was always like an obscure rule that was pretty degenerate. I mean, can we all just agree? Like, I understand it was a fun way to do things, but it was a fun way to do like pretty broken things. Like, come on, like no one was looking to these expertise, like looking to cast a Gear Hulk or something like that. They were looking at Modern casting these weird like living end cards or the restore balance cards or the split cards. So I kind of think it was a long time coming. That might not be a popular thing to say, so I agree with them on changing it, and I do think it was time for that to be cleaned up and kind of, you know, messed with, because you can still cast like the living end and stuff like that. So I think there's still some interactions to be had. The only downside, and again, I agree with them, I think it was a good change. The only downside is basically with that announcement, they added like, 5 more cards to the standard ban list? So,
or modern,
or wait, the modern ban list. So, like, no one's really gonna play. It's gonna be much harder to play those cards again. Like, yeah, Zahir, Kari Zev's expertise might still get played in Living End because that's pretty decent, or like a restore balance list. But I mean, a lot of the interactions are gone. So we'll see what that does. I don't think that was a huge like change for Modern to begin with. Like those decks were actually still pretty fringe, if anything, right? I haven't seen them really come to the forefront too much.
No, they were fringe. People played them on occasion, but they weren't tier by any means.
Sure. So I guess, you know what, they were like, it didn't really do anything for Modern anyway, so let's just take this time with all these aftermath cards to just change it anyway. But I do agree. It's like you kind of backpedaled on all the hype of the expertise cards, because now a lot of them are pretty much useless. So
well, no one played them anyway, so it didn't matter.
Right. So there you go. So yeah, that's the change in a nutshell. But yeah, going in and cleaning up a lot of these obscure rules is just something that needs to happen. And if this is a side effect of that, I'm cool with it, because never really cared for it to begin with. So another real quick fast version before we wrap things up with Fishmail. Seth, the MTGO point that you wanted to make for the last like 2 weeks.
Okay, basically, this is a little late, but it's still very relevant. Wizards basically changed leagues on Magic Online. So instead of paying out booster packs, they are only paying out play points and the treasure chests, which has good and bad implications. The good news is it will hopefully stabilize booster prices. The bad news is, one of the bad news is that Wizards just keeps kind of going in circles and changing things haphazardly, not seeming to understand how to manage the economy. From a Moto collector's perspective, it's also a little troubling in the sense that basically when someone plays a tournament, the prizes they get for the tournament is coming out of your collection. It's almost like, picture you went to a GP, and to play the GP, you had to, I don't know, ante the best card in your collection into this prize pool, and then they spread those out among the winners. That's kind of what's happening, because if all the prizes, or primarily the prizes, not counting the play points, are cards that are coming into the system, that's lowering the value of all the cards in your collection slowly over time as more and more supply gets in there. So in a very real way, they're kind of paying for tournaments and giving the prize support with the value of Moto players' collections. So
I'm still confused though. Isn't that exactly the same as a booster pack? Because inside the booster pack, there are cards. So it's like they pre-cracked your booster pack.
Sort of, except the treasure chests are primarily older cards that aren't impacted by redemption, so you're losing that supplies diminish by redemption from the standard cards that come into the system in booster pack prizes because of redemption. These are older cards that don't have any redemption. So once the supply enters the system, it's never leaving. That card is always there, always adding supply to the market.
So the real question is, what does this do to Rashad Import?
Most of those cards are trending down, and we just got the new treasure chest update. And one of the big news stories, I guess, of the treasure chest update was many of the most expensive cards on Moto are becoming more common in the treasure chest. So you'll get ports roughly twice as much in treasure chests starting with the Amonkhet update than you would before. Same for a lot of the Power 9 cards. Black Lotus, the Moxen went from a really high rarity to a somewhat lower rarity. So those cards are going to be an even greater supply in the new treasure chests, which according to Wizards is to stimulate interest in vintage, with vintage leagues starting on Magic Online to have more supply out there, lower the entry. So those cards will likely be decreasing in price once we start getting the supply from Amonkhet treasure chests.
So do you like this change or no? Is this good for me or bad for me? Lay it on me.
It's good for you if you're not a Moto player. If you're a new Moto player,
oh, right.
No, let me say that differently. It's good for you if you're a new Moto player. You're someone that maybe wants to buy into Legacy, buy into Modern, buy into Vintage for the first time. You're going to be able to get cards at a lower price point because of these changes. It hurts the people that have been playing Moto for 10 years. They build up this big legacy vintage collection, have $10,000 invested in Moto cards. Those are the players who will likely be disappointed with these changes because their collection is going to be dropping in value. It's just slowly going to erode in value because of this additional supply. So I think it's good for a segment of Moto players and bad for another segment of Moto players.
So literally good for someone like me, not good for someone like you. That sucks.
Good
Sorry,
for you,
Seth.
bad for me. Actually,
sorry, Seth.
I mean, I think the hope is that this change will draw new people into the system. And if we see a big boom in Moto because new players are buying in, theoretically, the new demand from these new players could outpace the supply and like even things out. So it's not hurting the old players. Whether or not there's going to be the great Moto rush and all these new players coming because they can get in cheaper remains to be seen. So we'll have to, I guess, wait and see how everything turns out.
Fair enough. So there you have it, everyone. We apologize for taking a few weeks to address that, but hopefully that adds to the talks about all these changes, and we're glad to do it. So yeah, just apologize, but. We finally were able to catch up on it amongst all this Amonkhet discussion.
One more Moto thing, real quickly. If you are looking to get Modern Masters cards, you should probably do it. I bought a ton of Scalding Tarns thinking they wouldn't be reprinted as kind of a spec on Magic Online. And then, of course, they were reprinted and the price crashed. And now today, Scalding Tarn is more expensive than before anyone knew it was going to be in Modern Masters 2017. It's actually worth more now than before reprinting. So the prices have increased rapidly for chase cards, Liliana, Tarmogoyf, fetch lands. So if you want to buy those cards for your collection, on Magic Online in specific, you probably want to do that now because drafts have gone offline and there's no more new supply entering. So those prices are going to continue to tick up.
Well said. So, Richard, let's tackle some fish mail.
All right, here's where we answer your questions on cast. If you have questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish to the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions. So first question from OG Magikarp is God. Our weekly Hearthstone segment is here. Thoughts on Time Warp being mostly the same as Time Warp in Magic. So they released a new card in Hearthstone. It's Time Warp, and it looks exactly like Time Warp in Magic. Is this copyright infringement?
I don't know. You know what? This is just me personally. I remember Blizzard going out and suing other companies for really remedial stuff like this. So you know what? I would say go ahead, Wizards, and do it. Try it. Because you know what? Someone it's
hates
time.
Blizzard, man.
No. Because it's time for someone to bully the bully on this one. And I remember it was some like crazy fiasco for anyone that has followed Defense of the Ancients or Dota, and then this is a random kind of reference here, but I remember Blizzard going after Valve for some silly thing, like one of their characters was named the Skeleton King, and they had a character named the Skeleton King, so it's like remedial stuff like that. You know what, Wizards, go ahead and get your time stop. Go after him.
I mean, this is not the first time, because remember Hex? The Hex that we hear about today, they were sued by Wizards because their game looked exactly like Magic, and they had cards like Lightning Bolt or something that like literally was Lightning Bolt. So at some point this does become a problem, but I don't know how many cards you need, and like I don't know where the threshold is that it becomes a problem, because Hearthstone is pretty different from Magic, but when you're giving this to a panel of jurors who know nothing about TCGs, they're like, yeah, our cards look the same and whatever, right? So I have no idea where this goes, but I don't see anything happening. I don't see WotC taking on Blizzard. Like, they're probably going to lose.
You know what? They should, because shame on these Hearthstone developers for not knowing a blue card from Champions of Kamigawa that came out like 15 years ago. They should know better.
I mean, it is exactly the same. 5 mana, called Time Warp, take an extra turn. It is literal MTG Time Warp, but I have no idea what the legalities of it is. So I don't know if this counts as copyright infringement. I couldn't imagine anything happening, but it makes me feel like Hearthstone's a bit lazy or something. Can't you like at least change the name or something? Like,
no, you can't, because look, like you're like, at how much mana do you put it at? I'll find you a time walk effect in Magic that is at that much mana, right? Like, there's only so many things you can do.
But couldn't you change the name? Couldn't you come up with a non-time warp name?
Is there time warp in World of Warcraft? That is the question.
I don't know.
Maybe there is. Magic stole it from Blizzard. Maybe time warp is the ability of something.
There's like a mage ability, but I thought it was time stop, but it's time warp. So even more shame on them for not knowing a card from like 20 years ago.
All right, next question. Paradoxical data. What cards in Amonkhet do you think we'll see play in Modern?
Richard already answered that one. It's Ronas all the way. Let's do it.
I got Ronas. I got, was it Bone Picker?
Bone Picker, yeah.
Gideon is going to be there to randomly break decks, get into the trials. Those are my top 3, I think.
I think for me, As Foretold is number 1. I think that's going to create new archetypes.
Tier 1 though?
Tier playable. I mean, I didn't say tier 1. It's not against the odds. I think it'll be a real deck.
Yeah. Okay.
Also,
I keep looking at
Harsh Mentor.
Oh yeah,
Harsh Mentor was definitely slotted for a lot
of
decks as well.
I gotta ask. It may not be on the surface, but what do you think of like Shadow of the Grave? That just screams like a card that could be crazy.
I think Shadow of the Grave has some really interesting combo potential. It seems like a kind of card that it'll take a while for people to figure out, but if you had to pick the card that like 5 years from now is going to create the next Amulet Bloom or like some deck that no one knew was there out of Amonkhet, this is probably the card.
Yes.
Well, good news is we have Rest in Peace, so when that happens, we're ready for it. Next question from Luke Maciel. Recently, new blocks have tons of hate for previous ones. Don't you feel like Standard has become block constructed? Well, you can say that when Gideon gets out of here, but he's still playing with lots of cards from the old blocks, so yeah. I don't think that a new block invalidates the old block.
I think it's partly the shift to the 2-block setup where Wizards wants to make sure the mechanics from a block are good enough to see you play, and they have to do that within 2 sets. So I think that adds to the block constructed field to some extent. But I agree with Richard overall.
All right. From Mean Pork. Underrated card time. For Aether Revolt, Chaz said Rishkar, Richard said Solemn Recruit, Seth said Quicksmith Spy.
Oh.
Chaz is the winner. What are the underrated card picks for Amonkhet?
I feel like I feel like all the cards I would mention are already being talked about.
I got you.
I'm gonna have to go last. You go first.
Okay. The card that no one's expecting to break constructed but will is Approach of the Second Sun. You just
I don't know. It is
All
does
right,
seem pretty
that is
crazy.
out there.
you just fork it and you win. That's all. That's it. Fork any sort of copying it effect, and you just
as
win
we're
the
told,
game.
like, how do you cheat this into play?
You just marvel it.
Marvel, fork, good game.
All right, I'm gonna go with
Marvel
I don't know.
game.
Is Black Delver on people's radar? Oh, how about the zombie Plague Belcher?
Ooh,
That
3
thing is
mana,
so
5/4
massive.
that puts 2 -1/-1 counters, resetting your Dross messengers.
Oh, that is so nice.
We probably don't need more 3-drops, but if we did, this is pretty good. And it's a 5/4 menace, so it actually trades with a Goyf that's not crazy powered up. So let's go with Plague Belcher, although I think the Black Delver is going to be good.
This is so hard. You know what? I know people are talking about it already, but I think I'm going to jump on that Glory Bringer. I know it's a red card, it's not green, so this time around, like, I can't stick with that card, like green, but I don't think it's as bad as we thought, like, especially if Heart of Kiran's gone, like, but even with Heart of Kiran, I mean, it's fine. They block the Heart of Kiran, you get to ping off one of their creatures, you stop the Heart of Kiran.
I think Glory Bringer is good.
But sticking with green, I know it's another one, but I literally wrote off like Honored Hydra as like an intro pack rare, but that card is actually pretty good.
Oh no! If this thing sees play,
I don't
there's gonna be
know.
a doubling season in there. Because otherwise, this is you just cast a Gear Hulk. You just cast a Gear Hulk.
Yeah, that's true, but we'll see. But I'm
right.
sticking with Glory Bringer. That's my main one. Not
From
changing.
Floyd Claypool, do you guys think the CMC of Amonkhet is a bit higher than past sets?
Well, with the rule change, where all the split cards count as their total combined converted mana cost, I think that's definitely true.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
excluding that, I didn't get that feeling, but I mean, once the set is out on Gatherer, we could just calculate it. But I don't get that feeling from this set.
I think part of it too is a lot of cards are cost 1 more than other versions, but they have cycling, which kind of makes up for that. So you have like Stasis Snare or Oblivion Stone or Oblivion Ring that's 1 more mana, or Force Spike that's 1 more mana. But I think that's because you get the upside of cycling it. So I think that might be the other reason it sometimes looks that way.
Yeah, same thing with most of the Aftermath cards. Like the front side is pretty much on par with what you'd pay for some of these cards, but then the Aftermath is like 2 or 3 more mana for the same effect, like just because it has Aftermath.
All right, next question from Nate87. What are your opinions on Green Black Infect?
Isn't this version like in and out of favor just because people don't want to deal with Path to Exile anymore? Like they just play the Phyrexian, what is it, the Crusader?
Yeah, I think it's fine. It's decent. If you want to play a more kind of controlling, resilient version of Infect that isn't really going to get the combo kill, then that's the way to go. So I think it's a reasonable deck, but it's obviously not a tier deck at this point. But it's good enough that it spiked a tournament here and there, or spiked a league on Magic Online or something. So it's playable.
All right, next question. AJ Hewitt. My friends and I think someone will die this block. I'm thinking of Johnny. Friend thinks Gideon. Your thoughts?
Maybe both.
And Johnny's not even here to die, is he?
Yeah. I think Johnny is on Amonkhet.
Probably Gideon. That if I had to pick one,
Yeah, I think
Gatewatch
Gideon,
member.
but I heard a lot of people saying Nissa because Nissa is pretty forgettable and there's nothing important going on with her arc.
Wow.
There's no loose ends for her to finish up, so they can just like off her. And this is her final last hurrah as Simic. So,
I thought we missed this controversy, but isn't there some big love story between her and Lilith Chandra that's like was a huge
I
news
think
this
so.
weekend?
That's like, yeah, I think it's like a budding love interest, which is actually pretty interesting. So maybe that's what they did to keep these characters around.
oh yeah, if they're going there, then they can't kill Nissa, or maybe they can, and Chandra goes even more crazy, and then
Ooh.
you get like a different color Chandra.
Ooh, yeah.
Next question from Martyrdom. with the split card changes, what rule change do you think will happen next? Any wants on rule changes?
Not off the top of my head.
Go back to the old legend rule, so you can legend rule your opponent's legend. I miss that. I miss that rule.
I do too.
I'm waiting for something on missed triggers. Like every year they change it, so you have no idea how to handle a missed trigger. It's like, are you supposed to enforce them? Are you not supposed to enforce them? If you don't enforce them, do you both get a warning? What do you get? I don't know. They keep changing this rule. Last question from Black Mountain. 1v1 commander coming to Moto means that all optimal decks will need command tower. Do you guys have any ideas on the supply of said card? I see it was a promo. What kind of promo was it?
I'm trying to double check that right now.
I think it was a Judge promo, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it's different on Magic.
I'm sure they'll add it because it's in like every commander product. So they'll probably just add it to treasure chests.
Yeah, and I
it
believe
was in Legendary Cube as well.
Yeah, so the supply is actually not bad. It's pretty cheap right now. It's like 10 cents, which is pretty cheap. And I believe it was like one of the like store activity. They have 2 monthly promos, one for playing tournaments, one for spending like $20 at the store. I'm fairly confident it was one of those, which are very high supply for promos. And like Richard said, treasure chests in this case can actually do some good things because you can increase the supply very quickly. I don't even want to count how many horrible, unplayable Conspiracy 2 and Commander 2016 cards I have from opening treasure chests. Ash Barons, I've opened so many of those. And it takes up the rare slot. It is literally the worst thing on Moto. Oh, so bad.
Yeah. How is that? Just a real quick, I know we're trying to wrap things up. Has there been hype about that at all? I mean, you guys play it more than I do. Since we've talked about it last.
I don't even know when it's releasing. When is it releasing?
Oh.
They said this summer sometime. I don't think there's a firm date. And there is some hype. It's not like people are freaking out about it, but I've definitely had a few questions and interest from people. So there's some amount of hype, but it's not like revolutionizing Moto or anything like that.
Okay.
Well, maybe it will, because maybe people will start playing it, and then they'll actually go play Casual Commander.
There you go.
Filling up the Casual Commander rooms.
That would be
all
sweet.
Right, so that's all of our fish mail this week. Thanks to everyone for sending them in. Remember, at MTG Goldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, those were great questions. I did see the YouTube comment, so no, I did not get the Switch. I know, Seth, you answered it, but I did see it. So
After
whoever
all
asked
this
that,
time, no Switch.
no,
still?
Now you know what? It just has to have Netflix on it, so now I'm just waiting for that because Savannah uses it to watch Netflix, and I'm just like, all right, well, I can't not have the Netflix on it, so it just turns to another Netflix machine.
Speaking of Switch, it's actually pretty sweet.
Really? Did
you get a Switch?
I did not, but I had my brother was around for Easter, and he got one and brought it, and we played on it a bit, and it seemed pretty cool.
All right, fair enough. So yeah, that's the update. I will let you know when it happens. Whenever Netflix gets put on there, that's probably when I will start looking for it again.
So you're buying this entire device to watch Netflix, not play any games or do anything.
You know how it is.
Also,
everything eventually just turns into a Netflix box.
On the way out the door, we should remind everyone, pre-release this weekend. Yes. So go to your LGS Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, whenever you want to do it. Check out Amonkhet. And then Moto on Monday, they've definitely moved up the release of Moto. So that starts next Monday as well. So play Amonkhet this weekend. It should be sweet. It looks fun.
Yeah, glad they moved that up on Moto too.
Even the stuff that looks horrible looks like it'll be fun in limited. So I'm excited to try the limited format because like Aftermath and that stuff, I could imagine being really powerful. And you actually, as weird as it sounds, kind of want to open those in your sealed pool when you're playing pre-release, as much as you don't want to open them in your box when you're cracking for value. So there's some weird tension there.
There definitely is. They are strong.
Nonsense. I'm just going to open Liliana.
All right,
I'll take my value and cool card. Come on, please.
All right, so yeah, definitely go play. I am certainly going to make it this time. I'm trying to get more into the limited. I didn't get to play Aether Revolt as much as I wanted to, but yeah, definitely going for this. All right, everyone, that is going to be a wrap. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We will see you all next time. This is going to be the MTG Goldfish crew, signing out.